welcome back to another podcast. My name is Douglas Grummins, and thank you for joining me this evening. This episode is brought to you from the inspiration of a fellow coworker of mine. We had a conversation at work about meditation, and my fellow coworker was telling me how whenever he tried to meditate, he could not ever stop the constant chatter that was going on in his mind, which is common with many people, especially when they start meditating. At first, it can seem like all of existence is fighting against you, but it's not. The reality is more that you are, for the first time, looking in and seeing the chaos, seeing what Gautama Buddha would have described as a lake with thousands of ripples over the surface of the lake. Every thought is like another ripple on the surface of the lake. Creating waves and waves upon waves and fragments, and the whole lake seems to be distorted. And trying to use concentration to calm these waves, to calm all these ripples and all this distortion, it's actually the energy adds to the distortion of the lake. So what to do? First, a little has to be known about the lake. The lake, disturbed, is your mind. And then the other end of the spectrum, the lake completely calm, undisturbed, is your soul. The question is how do you get from a disturbed condition to a completely calm and peaceful, serene, silent condition? And remember, these two conditions are not two separate things. One is just the absence of the other. A calm, peaceful soul is the absence of the mind. The two cannot coexist. Either you have ripples on the lake or the lake is completely calm. Those are the two conditions. And Gautama Buddha has the ultimate plan to bring about this calmness in the lake. And he calls his path the middle path, being in the middle. And being in the middle is not adding thoughts to the surface of the lake, adding ripples to the lake. It's just sitting there and watching the lake. Just sit and watch and just become a watcher and not add any additional thoughts to it, because eventually the ripples will settle down. Everything will settle and become calm just by watching. You might ask, how does watching become the transcendental factor? And like what Buddha says, the middle way, I had a revelation today that the realization of the middle way is that we are all existing just in the middle of existence. If it's too hot or too cold, those are extremes. But right in the middle, we can live, we can exist. And also with time being past and future, neither of which we exist in. We exist in the present moment. But the present moment seems to be pulled to the left being to the past and to the right being towards the future. And we're constantly pulled by our desires, pulled by our wants, and our wants keep pulling us into the future, but also our fears pull us into the past. So these two extremes keep us off center. They keep us either to the left or to the right, and never really balanced in the center. Because the more balanced you become in the center, the more you can live completely in the middle, the less these things can pull from you. And Buddha realized this, and its comparison with the ripples on the lake. Buddha tells a story of a disciple of his who was standing next to a river, and he couldn't meditate. He couldn't get into that frame of mind. His mind was going crazy with thoughts, and he couldn't slow down the thoughts. So Buddha said to him, "Can you see through the clearness of the water in the river and see the bottom of the river?" And the monk said, "Yes, I can see the bottom of the river." Then Buddha stepped his foot into the water and asked him, "Now can you see the bottom of the river?" And he said, "No, it's all murky and gray." And he said, "Okay, now just watch. Just sit here. Don't do anything. Don't touch the river. Just sit and watch and see what happens." And he did. And after about an hour, the river calmed down, the dust settled, and he could see the bottom again. And he told Buddha, "Hey, Buddha, Buddha, I can see the bottom of the river now. And I understand your message. What you were trying to tell me was that if I just sit and watch my mind, then it'll calm just as this river calmed." This story uses the reference of the river, but it could be a lake as well. I like to use the lake reference more than I use the river reference, mostly because with the reflection of a lake, when a lake is completely calm and still and peaceful and quiet, the reflection of the moon, the reflection of the sun is one complete whole picture. Whereas if there's ripples in the lake, then there are hundreds of reflections of the moon or the sun. I mean, the moon and the sun are one, but with the reflections, there are thousands. And these thousands of reflections, fragments of the whole, can also be related to how religions are started too. Because if the mind is stilled, you have a moment of experiencing godliness, and this godliness is one complete picture, one whole reflection of the moon. And then the mind steps in and tries to relate this experience to other people. To you, it was a whole one experience. But when you try to relate it to other people, you have to use the mind. And then the ripples come in. And it's almost impossible to relate truth or anything of wholeness using a partial language. So the experience gets distorted. One little fragment, one thousandth of a fragment gets carried on, maybe because that's the best that the experiencer could relate his experience with, is one piece, one little fragment of the whole picture. And then that fragment gets handed down to another person, so the fragment gets even smaller. So you can imagine, through a history of 2,000 years, the fragments keep getting smaller and more distorted by everyone's interpretation of the one whole experience. Instead of meditating and stilling the mind and seeing the one whole experience in its entirety, people keep going through scriptures and other works and trying to relate truth by using scripture, so it does get distorted quite a bit. And these are the reasons why I meditate and why I keep meditating, because it helps you maintain a center. Meditation itself, in the beginning stages, helps get away from the pull of the future and the past, and the more you meditate, the more you're pulled into the center. And like I said, the center is the present moment. It's the only moment that exists in reality. But the more you live in that present moment, the more focused you can be, and the more you'll know the truth. In other words, a blind man can't walk up to you and tell you that the sky is green. I mean, because you can laugh at him and say, "Hey, I have eyes. I can see that the sky is blue." But you can't argue with a blind man. He has logic and he has reasoning. He has theories and everything there is about light, but he just needs to be able to see. And Buddha's whole approach was to help people to have eyes. He didn't waste time arguing with people or debating with them or discussing great theories. His whole approach was to help you to have eyes. He was more like a physician rather than a theologian. He just wanted to help you to be able to see. Because if someone else experiences truth, it's subjective. You cannot experience someone else's truth. If it's borrowed truth, then it's actually a lie. It's not truth itself. It's a reflection of truth, like the lake. It's a very small piece, but even then, it's just a reflection. It's not the actual truth itself. I mean, the objective of having the reflection in the lake is to see the moon. The moon is the truth, and the reference of the moon is the same as an analogy of becoming enlightened. This one wholeness, seeing the whole picture, is the same as what I call coming home, being enlightened, being born again, or twice born, as the Indians called it. They called it Dwiji. meaning yes, twice born. And one who's experienced enlightenment has reached the other shore. That there are, of course, there are two shores to every river, and Buddha says to be like a timber that's floating down the river. If the timber is not obstructed by man or by some fault of the river's sides, blocking the timber from reaching the ocean, the timber will eventually, if left alone, will reach the ocean. And if your mind is left alone long enough, then you too will experience the ocean or experience enlightenment. And there are some pitfalls to the journey also. Once you start going within and experiencing your center and this meditative experience of stillness and wholeness, then the mind does rebel at certain points and makes you desire things more, creates kind of friction, because the mind knows it's in trouble. Soon it will lose control over you, and your consciousness will become the master, and then the mind becomes the servant. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a different way to live, living through consciousness and experiencing things, through your awareness. But before this can happen, you have to go through a little bit of chaos. It's like a storm that dissolves, like a hurricane that's dissolving. Once it's all dissolved, then there's peace and calmness. But your mind, living in the mind, is the same thing as living in a storm. It's constant turbulence, and there's always tension. Living in the mind creates tension, and the tension is between the past and the future, and it's nonstop. But living with consciousness, living with awareness, there is no tension, there is no past, and there is no future. It's just all in the present moment. But I can understand people's hesitations as to why they're afraid to meditate. The thought of this chaos that could happen can set you back, and it could put fear in your heart. But nothing is gained without a little bit of courage. And with that note, I guess we'll end this talk. I hope that I reached out and touched some of you. I hope that what was said can help change your lives and help you to experience the oneness, the wholeness, the reflection of the lake within yourselves. And the same reflection that's within you is the same reflection that happened to Buddha, the same reflection that happened to Christ, the same reflection that happened to every mystic. The reflection's all the same. It's a oneness. It's a whole experience. It's no different. It's only the reflections, the ripples, the disturbances in the lake that are thousands. Wholeness, truth is one. And with that note, we'll go ahead and close. Thanks again for joining me. Please look at some of my other videos. You can find my works on YouTube and also through my Facebook posts. Once again, thank you for joining me. Take care of yourselves, and namaste if you're in